So with texting, comparing that to direct mail, when you look at like the number of texts you have to send out to the number of offers you send out, whatever that process looks like, is it worse or better or the same for texting when you compare that to direct mail?
It's like about the same. So we get a deal for about every 4,000 messages we send out. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. Again, there's a lot of variables that go into that. We primarily target properties in, I think it's Justin Sleva calls them bass boat properties. So the property is the same price that somebody who's going to go buy a bass boat would buy a boat for, which is that like $30,000 to like $150,000 range. Justin, feel free to call me out on it. I'm sorry to use your name.
We're the Google bass boat prices.
Yeah, right. But we target properties with exit values, meaning sale prices, between $30,000 and $150,000. And that's where we see really good responses. If you're talking to property owners that have $1 million properties, you're going to see it play out a little bit differently.
Now, with texting, so there's been a bit of changes going on here in terms of like now you have to register to continue sending SMS to U.S. phone numbers. I know OpenPhone has sent out this email. A lot of people are talking about how that's a new thing. I'm not sure how that has impacted things on launch control. Has that messed with anything at all? Like, has it made things harder or more complicated? Or do you think any more regulations will show up that will make text marketing less viable? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think my short answer is yes. I don't know if we'll still be text marketing in 5 years from now. I know I'm going to keep doing it until we see some reason not to, more or less. But there's probably a risk for a couple of reasons. Number one, Apple in the past year introduced a report junk button. So, you may get flagged as junk more often with iPhone carriers especially. Now, a nice thing Launch Control does is it like cycles a bunch of phone numbers for you. So your risk there is a little bit lower. But I mean, we haven't seen a decrease in our acquisition rate, our response rate, or anything to that effect through texting as of now. It's something we're monitoring very frequently. One of the metrics we measure is how many outbound text messages did we send today, and then all the leads that come with that. So it's really cool when you can start drawing pictures. We really started tracking our metrics more heavily in November and December. And once you've got about 2 or 3 months of data, you can finally start to paint some pictures and reverse engineer some things and say, hey, why did we get 7 contracts out and 0 signed? That was actually an issue we had at one point. Was in our process, we were getting these offers accepted and we'd, send out the contract via DocuSign and people wouldn't sign it. And I was like, what's going on? We spent about a week digging into it. And really, it's a function of sales process. So here's a couple of things. Number one, we weren't setting expectations. So when you're on the phone with sellers, something you need to say is, hey, so we've got a 1-page contract coming your way. I just want you to know it's so simple. Anyone can read it. But what we're going to do is we're going to send this over, blah, blah, blah. Let us know what questions you have. And that's something I just want to tweak there is don't say, let me know if you have any questions. Say, let me know what questions you have. You got to assume these people are going to have questions, right? And if you assume that, it opens it up and makes it just a little bit more inviting versus if you have any questions is, well, maybe I reach out, maybe I don't. But anyways, so number one is setting expectations. Okay. Hey, super simple contract. Anyone can read it, right? Because now they feel kind of stupid if they don't understand something, but you've invited them to ask questions. So they're more likely to expect it and work with it versus if you don't say something in that messaging, what's going to happen is they're going to get your contract. And if it's a slightly more sophisticated seller, they're going to ask, what is this? If they've sold any real estate in the past and you use 1 or 2 page contracts like many investors do, people are going to wonder what we're running, what we're doing with these contracts because they're not the typical, state contracts that people see with real estate. Then you've got to backtrack and all of a sudden you've lost credibility and you've lost trust with the seller, right? So I tell people all the time, this business is like 70, 80% price, but the remaining 20, 30% is really a function of like sales process and trust. You really need to hammer in those details if you want people to work with you. Because Alex Hormozi, again, identifies in the value equation, one of the variables in the denominator is customer perceived likelihood of achievement, meaning, am I actually going to get what this person says I'm going to get? So we tell them, hey, I'm going to give you 10 grand. And they get this 1-page dinky contract and they're like, I don't know if I'm getting my 10 grand. And all of a sudden they don't want to work with you because they don't see it as valuable. And so anyways, that being said, super, super valuable in our sales process once we had the data to then go back and do that. Number 2 actually was we would work with sellers and say, hey, glad we can agree. You're going to sell this for 30 grand. Let me just go verify this with my team before I can get a contract out. Can I call you back in 10 minutes with a confirmation? They say yes. Okay, great. right? What you're actually doing in that 10 minutes is prepping a contract. So our team will prep the contract, send it out, give them a phone call and say, hey, John, in your email inbox, you should have a contract right now. Why don't we just go through it and see what questions you have about it? And you're going to boost your ratio of people that actually sign that contract now. So these small tweaks in our process got us to get all these contracts signed and people to trust us and work with us. We have designers that just redesigned our contracts so they don't look the same as everybody else in Pebble. We just hired a graphic designer for $200 in like Upwork or something. We have a designer that created a one-page graphic before all our contracts that are sent out, walking customers through the customer journey is what we call it. So it's a 6-step kind of process with like a little road in it. It's a roadmap, right? Of you click this and then you do this, and then it has roles and responsibilities. You try to make it simple for anybody to read it, but it looks professional, and then people say, oh, this looks good, we trust you, right? So again, you're trying to drill in trust. You want them to think what's going to happen is going to happen.